Hello and welcome to German Diction IPA. This is Class 2, a closer look at forward vowels. In this lecture, we're going to look at the characteristics of German vowels. What is a forwarding vowel? What are the forwarding vowels? How do we speak and sing these vowels? And then identify the written letters and positions that make these sounds. Last time we discussed a little bit about the characteristics of German as a language and the sounds as a whole, and now we're going to be looking specifically at the German vowels. One very important characteristic is the distinction between long and short vowels, so the duration of the vowels. This can have a big effect on the meaning of the word. And there's also closed and open vowels. This refers to quality of the vowel, and we'll look more at that. There are several sounds that don't exist in English, and we're going to go over how to make those. And another important characteristic is that the intensity of the vowels are maintained throughout the entire word, meaning there's no dipping off in the middle of a syllable. That's not to say there's not inflection, but the intensity is maintained throughout, so it's not just to achieve legato, it's in order to maintain the language. And now we come to the question, what is a forward vowel? Well, a forward vowel is a vowel that is made mainly by adjusting the position of the tongue while the lips stay in a fairly neutral position. So as we learn these vowels, notice where your tongue is and how it's moving from one vowel to the other. And now we need to know, what are the forward vowels? And we have a few. I'll just read them across. E, I, ah. So I'm sure some of these sound familiar and some of them don't. And we're going to go over all these. So just a little suggestion, when you're learning these vowel sounds, try to find similar sounds in your own language, and as we work together and as you listen to this and you find the correct vowel, notice what moves in order to achieve that right position, that correct position. Is it the tongue? Is it the lips? Is it both? For this lecture, you're probably going to notice mostly movement of tongue. Now let's look a little more in depth at each sound. On the left you see the IPA symbol, and to the right you see some qualities and descriptions of the sound. So we start off with E. And this is closed, so when we say closed, we're talking about the quality of the vowel. And E is also long, and when we say long, we're talking about duration. Something to keep in mind as we go to sing this sound is that it needs to stay loose. It does have a tendency, especially for American singers, to get tight. E, E. You notice the tongue moves really high, your throat is a little closed, and we want to avoid that. So E is what we're going for. So before we go on to some examples of words that contain the sound E, I have a little suggestion. As we learn these sounds and are practicing speaking these words, try to get in the habit of knowing what you're saying alongside how you're saying it. So know the meaning of the word as well as the phonetics or the IPA for it. And now we come to some examples of German words that have the sound E in them. And also, as we do this, feel free to pause the video and try repeating some of these things. If you're really good with these sounds, you can continue ahead. If you need to review, you can always go back. Die, Stiel, hier, ihr, bieten. Now next we have and this one is open, so again we're talking about quality. and it's short in duration, and it needs to stay focused. A lot of times it can get if it loses focus, it loses its quality. So make sure really we do a nice sound. You'll notice that the tongue is lower for this sound than it is for the E. So E. This is the sound we're going for. And here are some words that have the sound in them. Willen, bitten, mit, nimmer, Lippen, Lippen. Now we're going to look at words that sound similar that contain these two sounds. So here we have a list with E sounds. Lied, neat, ihm. And now some similar sounding words with I, the open version. Lit, mit, im. Now let's try reading each of those next to each other. Lied, lit. Once more. Lied, lit. Now, meet, mit. Meet, mit. Ihm, im. So be sure to notice not only the difference in quality between these two vowels, the E is closed and the I is open, but also the duration within the word. And obviously you're going to sing the vowel for as long as the composer set the note, but you'll notice, and you'll start noticing as you're looking into German rep, that composers do set things differently based on the length of the vowel in the spoken language. So this is something to be very aware of, and especially if you're doing dialogue like in Zauberflöte or something like that. Next we come to a vowel sound that does not exist in English, E. This is long, so again, duration, it's closed, quality. The tongue position is really close to an E sound. You might be saying, didn't he just say E? No, I said E. So we'll go over the difference between the two in a moment. The tongue is closer to E than it is to I, actually. So just practice sliding down. E, from E to I. E. And go really slowly. Go incredibly slowly and feel the tongue moving. E. So it's somewhere between there, and it's actually very close to E. So I'll stop when we hit the E sound. E. That's it. E. 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 So try that a few times. I know that's kind of weird, and it probably feels odd to do, but give it a shot and try to figure out where that sound is. If you can do it automatically, that's fantastic. But also don't be discouraged if you don't get this sound right away. Obviously, I'm not a native German speaker. I had to learn this sound, and I remember this one really killed me for a long time. It was a few weeks before I really was able to hear the difference and articulate it with my tongue and consistently produce this sound. So this is something that we'll continue to work on throughout the semester. Don't worry too much if you don't get it right now, but listen to it as many times as you can and just keep trying and keep moving your tongue and try it out. And here are some words with the E sound. Dien, Seele, mir, ihre, ihr. Once more, since it's such a special vowel. Dien, Seele, mir, ihre. ear. Now let's look at similar words that contain E and E. So, starting from the left and going to the right, we have beaten, beaten. Lieben, lieben. Wien, Wien. Now you may be saying he just said the same words twice. And I didn't. I promise you. I went back and I listened and I made sure they are truly two different words. So if you if you don't hear the difference right away, again, it's really okay. But go back and listen as many times as you can until you really get the difference and are able to recognize the difference between the two. So we'll leave that there for now, and let's move on to the next sound. This is short. It's open. One of the difficulties is that it needs to really maintain focus within the vocal line. It does tend to drop sometimes, gets spread kind of goes more towards sometimes. This is what we're looking for. So here are some words that contain the sound. Den, Mensch, lästern, Männer, vergeben. Now let's look at some similar words with E and E. So the closed E sound, not E, but E and E. So starting from the left and going to the right. Dien, den, stehlen, stellen, Seele, Geselle. Now if you want a real challenge, here we have the difference between all four vowels that we've just gone over. So E, E, I, E. So again, reading from the left to the right. Bieten, bieten, bitten, betten. If you want to have some fun, give that a try. This next sound is a little interesting. It's an open, long vowel, and in spoken language, it's usually pronounced a little closer to the closed E sound, but for singing purposes, we tend to open it up. And when you listen to native speakers, you see sometimes, and you hear sometimes that it goes a little more closed or it goes a little more open depending on the word, even though the rule stays the same. And for our purposes right now, we're going to try to keep this pretty consistent. And as you become more comfortable with the language, you'll know when it gets a little more closed and when it gets a little more open. It's just, this is one of those things. And it will become clear when your tastes and when your ears are exposed to more native singers. So the sound is and we see it in words like Tränen, wäre, Väter, ähnlich. And now we come to the bright ah, and the ah actually is more of a central vowel than a forwarding vowel, but we list it here for simplicity's sake, but know technically that it's actually a central vowel. So this one is the long, bright ah. Just so we know, when we're talking about vowels, a lot of times you notice we talk about long and short and then open and closed. And ah can be long, but it's neither closed nor open. It's kind of like when we're talking about intervals, there's a major, minor, third, but there are no major, minor, fourths, and fifths. So the ah is kind of like that. And here are some examples of ah, Ahnung, Tag, nach, Wahlen, Saal. And now we have the same sound, but it's just shorter in duration. Ah. And again, it's bright. It's neither open nor closed. And here are some examples of short, bright ah, Wasser, danken, wallen, Wald, Nacht. Earlier we talked about how the duration of the vowel can affect the meaning of the word, and here we have some examples that show words that have similar sounds except for the difference in vowel length. So on the left side we have the long ah, and on the right we have the short ah. So I'll start on the left and go to the right. Wahlen, Wallen, nach, Nacht, alle, alle. So this duration is actually very important to German. It does change the meaning, and even though the notes in the piece are going to be set for a certain duration, we still need to know when it's actually long and when it's supposed to be short. Congratulations, you've made it through all the forwarding vowels. Now it's time to practice, and we're going to put these sounds in context by reading some German texts. And as we get into this, I want to remind you of the importance of knowing what you're saying before you go into saying it. So we're going to go over the text and we're going to go over the translation before we go over how to say the text. So here we have our first text, and it's from the Brahms Requiem, from the third movement, the big baritone solo. What does it mean? Well, it means, Lord, teach me that I must have an end. Some uplifting stuff. So it's really important. Look at each word. Know what each word means. Embrace the meaning and the affect of the line before you go on. So take a moment, look it over. Just take a few seconds. So I'm going to read it once at a poetic reading, just so you get a sense of the flow of the language, and we're going to go over how to make all these sounds in a little bit. So, Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss. Once more. Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss. A good first step when we're doing this is to identify all the vowel sounds and make sure that those are right first. Take a second, look them over. If you want, write them down. But here they are. So, going from left to right, we have E. And this upside down one, remember, is the schwa, Then this one we haven't gone over, but it's aw. Next one, I, 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 O. Now take a moment, pause the video, and go through all those very slowly. Now let's try them all together without stopping, without breaking any of the line. I know that's really funny, and it probably feels and sounds a little uncomfortable, but when we do this, we really get the sounds into our body, and it's a good check to make sure we know what the sounds are. So if it takes you a minute to get all these sounds right and clear in your head, take that time. It's much better to go slowly and make sure everything is correct than to go through it quickly and have to go back and fix things. Fixing things, as you know, takes a lot longer than learning them right the first time. So I'll do that again and embrace the uncomfortability of it. So hear how each one kind of morphs into the next one and goes into the next one. The majority of these are forwarding vowels, so they're all sounds that we've just gone over. Try it now. And after you're comfortable with the vowel sounds, identify the consonant sounds. So here they all are, and we'll go across very quickly. R, L, R, D. And this X is the back CH. And remember the C with the squiggle is the umlaut. D, S, D, T, B, S. So you don't have to take as much time with those because the focus here is the vowels, but you can have fun with that too. And now let's put them together. So Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss. So again, that's gonna feel very funny, and it's not how we speak the language. Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss is how we would say it, and that's quick, and that's great, but we're learning how to do German for singing purposes, and this is a great way to make it more vocal. Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss. And this is also how we bring legato into German. And the legato is actually already there, we're just elevating it a bit. So I'd like you to use this approach as we go forward. We have a few more texts, and I'm not going to take as much time explaining why we're doing all this. We're just going to go through it, and if you need, pause the video at any time and take as much time as you need to get these things correct. So here we have a text from Meeresstille by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Now just take a moment to look at this translation and get a feeling for this line. And now I'll read it once. Tiefe Stille herrscht im Wasser, ohne Regung ruht das Meer. Now identify all the vowel sounds that we see. I, I, a, o, I, o, u, a, E. And now let's try that again with just speaking the vowels and all connected like we did in the last one. E, a, o, I, o, u, a, I. Now let's take a look at those consonants. T, f, sht, l, h, rsht, v, s, r, g, r, t, d, s, r. And here they are all together. And let's try this really slowly. Tiefe Stille herrscht im Wasser, ohne Regung ruht das Meer. And then once you're comfortable with that, a little faster. Tiefe Stille herrscht im Wasser, ohne Regung ruht das Meer. You can do that as many times as it takes until it becomes comfortable. Obviously, I've been doing this a while, so it comes a little quicker. Take as much time as you need. And here we have one more text, and this is from the Matthäus Passion, the St. Matthew Passion by our good friend J.S. Bach. Here's the line, and here's the translation. Again, some serious stuff. And I'll just read it once. Es wäre ihm besser, dass der selbige Mensch noch nie geboren wäre. This is one of the recitatives where Jesus is talking about Judas's betrayal. So now we'll identify the vowels again. I, a, I, o, I, o, I, And now let's try that with no break. And here we have the consonants. S, v, r, b, s, d, s, d, z, lb, g, sh, h, g, b, r, v, r. Great, and now we have both the consonants and the vowels. Just take a moment to look that over. And now let's try putting it together, very slowly. Es wäre ihm besser, dass derselbige Mensch noch nie geboren wäre. And then you'll do that a few times till it really gets in there, and then try practicing it with, all the feeling that's in this text. Es wäre ihm besser, dass derselbige Mensch noch nie geboren wäre. So that's it for the text for right now. Before you go on, make sure you really have these sounds in your body and you're comfortable with the ones that we've gone over. It's not going to be perfect just yet, but if you go slowly and try hard, it will set up some good practices for down the road. So, after you're comfortable, go on, and we're going to look at the rules. On to the rules. So as we talk about the rules, there's some important terms and concepts that we should know about. The first one is position, and position tells us where the letters that create the sounds are in relationship to other letters in the word. Single or double consonant refers to the number of consonants in a unit. Long and short refers to the duration of the vowel, not the quality, and we've talked a little bit about this. So these are some words you're going to hear a lot as we discuss the rules. Here we have our three texts that we just did. Herr, lehre doch mich, dass ein Ende mit mir haben muss. Tiefe Stille herrscht im Wasser, ohne Regung ruht das Meer. And finally, es wäre ihm besser, dass derselbige Mensch noch nie geboren wäre. And now we're going to examine each of these, and we're going to see which spellings correspond to which sounds. First, I would like you to identify all the E vowels, the closed E sounds. And you should find 4. And here they are. Now take a look at the actual words and see if you see any patterns with spelling. So here's what I notice. I know that instruction can be a little confusing. It's not very clear. What am I supposed to be looking for? So for this first one, I'll just tell you what I'm seeing. So when I see this first word, Mia, in the written word, I see a written I followed by a single consonant. In the next line, I see a written I-E. In the next line, I see I followed by an H. And then the last word, ni, another example of the written I-E making the E sound. So we can make these into 3 rules. We have the E sound when the written I precedes a single consonant. For example, mir, stiel. Just so you know, when we write those dashes like around the I, that's just a spelling of the word, whereas the brackets indicate the IPA, and so that's how we make the distinction here. So when the written I precedes a single consonant, when the written I precedes a written H, as in ihm, ihnen, and then whenever we see a written IE, and that can appear in any position, nie, tiefe. Now let's look at the text again and identify all the open I sounds. And here we find 5 examples of the I sound. See it in the top line on mich and mit. The second line, stille and im. And then on the last line, selbige. So now let's try to identify some of the spelling patterns that make this I sound. So in the top line with mich, I see a written I followed by 2 consonants. Mit, that's a small word, and we're going to talk about that. I know that kind of contradicts the rule that we just did, but we'll go over that in a second. Then we have on the next line, stille, and that's a written I with 2 consonants following it, a double consonant. Then the next one, im, and again we're going to talk about this. There are some exceptions to the rules, but these are very common words and we'll talk about them. And then the last line, selbige, and this is a special case where we have ig at the end of the word as part of a suffix. And so the rules that we can take from this are: when a written I precedes 2 consonants, like in the word stille and nimmer. And then in some small function words, and these are prepositions and such, im, which is in the, in, which means in, and mit, which means with. And you'll see these words many times. Just commit these words to memory. They don't follow the single consonant rule. They're just, it's best to memorize them and just know. And then in the suffix ig, selbige, selig, this written ig at the end of a word creates the I sound. And our next sound is the closed E. So take a moment to identify where we see the closed E. And we see 4 examples. I think you'll see similar spelling patterns as with the closed E. On the first line we have lehre, and we have a written E followed by an H. On the second line we have Regung, which is a written E followed by a single consonant. And then we have mir, and then we see a written double E. And on the bottom line, we have der, and that's a written E followed by a single consonant. So here we have all our rules. When the written E precedes a single consonant, as in the word der and Regung. When the written E precedes H, as in lehre and ihre. And whenever we have a written double E, whenever that appears in any position. So mir and Seele. Next up, we're going to be looking for the open sound, the open and short sound. So again, take a moment and check it out. And we have quite a few. So even on the first line, Herr, Ende. On the second line, herrscht. And the third line, es, besser, selbiger Mensch. And I also have some other examples to illustrate some of the other spellings. So we have den, Mensch, lästern, Männer, vergeben. And our rules for the open are when the written E precedes two consonants, as in Herr and besser. When the written A with the umlaut, the two dots over it, precedes two consonants, as in lästern and Männer. And then we also see it in prefixes, and we've talked a little bit about these prefixes in the first class. Ver, zer, vergeben, zerrissen. Now we're going to talk about the sound, the open, long version of So we only have two examples of this in the text that we looked at, and they're on the last line, wäre and wäre. So here are some other examples. Tränen, wäre, Väter, ähnlich. So we see this sound, and we make this sound when a written A with the umlaut precedes a single consonant, as in wäre and Tränen, and when the written A umlaut precedes H, ähnlich. And the next sound is the bright and long ah, and we only have one example in our texts, and it's haben on the first line. So here are some other examples of Ahnung, Tag, nach. The little asterisk just means it's an exception, and we'll talk about that later. Wahlen, Saal. So we use the long A when the written A precedes a single consonant. Haben, mal. When the written A precedes H, as in Ahnung and malen. And then when a double A appears in any position, as in Saal. And now we get to our last sound, the short, bright A. So take a moment to find all those A's. And we have a few. Wasser, das, and das. So we have the short A when the written A precedes two consonants, as in Wasser and Mann, and in some small function words like das and Mann. So good job, we made it through all the rules. And now we're going to look at some important exceptions. So these are words that don't really follow the rules that we lined out just now, but it's very good to know about them and commit them to memory, so when you see them, you know. For the closed E sound, we remember the rule is the written E followed by a single consonant or H, or a double E. And here we see that these words don't have that. The written E is followed by two consonants, but we still use the closed E. Werden, Erde, Pferd, Hirt, Wert, stets, edlen, erst. And then for the sounds, we have it in some small function words as we talked about, but here it is es, des, weg. And this weg one, this last one, it's only when it's a lowercase w. When it's capital, it's a noun, and it's Weg, which means path. Weg means get out of here. Weg. That's a lot of fun to say. And then moving to the right, we have the open I, and again some small function words, but we're just putting them here. Mit, hin, in, im. And the written the long A, nach, and sprachen. And then the short A, we talked a little bit, again, function words, man and das. So that's all the material for this week. I know it's a lot, but please make sure that you're comfortable with it by the next class. By our second class, be comfortable with all these rules and try your best to get the sounds. Once we're in class, we're going to be looking at text and we're going to have lots of opportunity to practice this. So if the sounds are still not clear to you, that's okay. That's what we're going to be working on in class. But the rules you can memorize now. You can go back as many times as you need. You can write them down, you can do whatever, but make sure you know and are comfortable with these rules by the time you get to class. And I'm looking forward to working with you on making these sound great. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.